Good morning, everybody. I am John Shriver, President and CEO of NJPAC, and I am very happy to welcome you to NJPAC's virtual Business Partners Roundtable. This is the Art Center's digital conversation series featuring discussions with business executives and thought leaders from New Jersey and well beyond. I want to thank our Business Partners Committee Chair, Joel Sherman of Atlantic Tomorrow's office, for all his help with this series. And I thank all of our friends at PNC Bank for their venerable sponsorship of these roundtable gatherings. My thanks as well to women at NJPAC, who are the co-presenters of today's event. And I send greetings to the president of Women at NJPAC, Faith Taylor, and thank her for all of her constant help and advice. I'm really pleased that today we have our whole event to speak with one person, and that is Tanuja Dehne, President and CEO of the Geraldine R. Dodge Foundation. Tanuja is a former C-level executive of NRG Energy, Inc., a Fortune 250 power company. She was at NRG for 12 years, where she served in various roles, including Executive Vice President, Chief Administrative Officer, and Chief of Staff. She oversaw NRG's information technology, communications, sustainability, and corporate marketing departments, as well as the company's charitable giving program, plus the construction of NRG's sustainable corporate headquarters in Princeton. Prior to these positions, she led NRG's Human Resources Department and served as Deputy General Counsel and Corporate Secretary. She also recently served as a Senior Advisor on Corporate Governance matters for the B Team, an NGO focused on mobilizing global leaders to drive a better way of doing business for the well-being of people and the planet. But most importantly, for today's conversation at the Dodge Foundation, Tanuja is leading Imagine a New Way, the foundation's transformation into an anti-racist organization, in her words, centering its work on racial equity and justice while designing a new model of philanthropy that democratizes power, redistributes wealth, and shifts economic control to communities in ways that are just and regenerative for people and the planet. So just to remind everybody of our timing this morning, this is a 45-minute session, 30 minutes of Q&A with Tanuja and me, following 15 minutes of questions by you. Odds are we're not going to get to all the questions, but we will do the best we can. So if you'd like to ask Tanuja a question, you can do so at any time by typing it into the Q&A box. And you can find the Q&A box when you hover your cursor at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Tanuja, thank you so much for joining us. There you are.
Here I am. Good morning, John. Thank you so much. Thanks for this opportunity. It's great to be here.
No, it'll be enlightening for everybody. So first of all, tell me about where you are. It looks like you're in campaign headquarters.
Well, welcome. I am zooming in from my home in central New Jersey on the land of the Lenape people. This is kind of where I've been hanging out for the last close to 24 months.
Exactly, right. Yeah, so we're back putting on shows. People are coming. It's the greatest. We are cautiously optimistic that we are heading for the exit with this pandemic, but one never knows. And now we have a flexible workplace policy, which is a thing we never had before. So all of a sudden, having worked from home for months and months and months, we said, this works, this can work, but so based on role, some people are able to take 1 or 2 days a week at home, and I think that means a lot to folks. Are you anticipating a return to work, office space?
We sure are, but as you just described, I think as a society and employers, I mean, we've really proven that we can be flexible and agile, and where FaceTime was so very important, we realized that we can adjust and pivot really quickly. So we've been building a remote work culture over the last 20 months, and it's worked. And we're really reevaluating how we show up in these virtual spaces and how we show up in our community in an effective way and in a caring way. I think we learned a lot from this pandemic.
Yeah, I think you're right. One thing I still have not learned is how to unmute myself, so it's like the last one of these we did, they said, here, I started to talk, and 90 seconds in, I realized I was entirely on mute, in front of hundreds of people. So,
well, John, I'll just say that I'm glad that my internet, fingers crossed, is working, and that my children are back in school, because when there were so many children on the internet at one time, as many people know and can relate, I think, you just never knew what the connectivity was going to be.
Okay, I think we'll be okay today. So to start, tell us a little bit about the Geraldine R. Dodge Foundation, what it does, who it has historically served. We know it, of course, as a major funder of the arts and the folks who make the Dodge Poetry Festival possible every 2 years. But give us a sort of a view from 30,000 feet.
Sure. So the Geraldine R. Dodge Foundation was founded by our patroness, Geraldine Rockefeller Dodge. It was formed in 1974 and has funded, well, actually has distributed over $500 million over the last almost 50 years, supporting arts, education, environment, informed communities, a very robust technical assistance program, as well as the Poetry Festival that you just described. Mrs. Dodge had, she had suggestions about, what should be funded, what we should focus on. But she had the foresight, as she founded this foundation many, many years ago, to know that there would be changes in our world, and left it to the trustees and officers of the organization to determine what the decisions were going to be about funding and other key decisions about the organization. And over time, over the almost last 50 years, the Dodge Foundation has proven to be, one that meets the moment, that answers the call through crises over the last almost 50 years. There was a docket on animal welfare that's shifted to really growing the arts and culture space, to environment, to news, and also collaborations. So, I am the fourth president and CEO of the Geraldine R. Dodge Foundation, and I stand on the shoulders of legacy of incredible people who have really laid the foundation, for lack of a better word, of an organization that is strong, that has values, respect and relationships, that's really positioned us to be able to make this huge transformation as we answer the call of this moment.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. 4 leaders over 50 years. That's pretty impressive. That's a long tenure for people, right? That speaks very, very well of the organization, I think. Tell us about your own history. You were successful in business for many, many years. You joined the Dodge board as a volunteer leader, and then when there was a search for a new CEO, you were the choice to lead the organization. How has your experience in business informed your work as the president of a foundation? 2 quite different enterprises.
They are quite different, but I had parallel tracks in my career over the last 30 years, as a corporate attorney, as you mentioned, in the corporate space, in the business side. But while that was happening, I was also a volunteer, a not-for-profit trustee, and bridged the 2 spaces in the governance realm. This is not the first time in my career that I've been an outsider, as one would call it. I left the legal world to join the business space, to head up human resources and then head up a number of administrative functions at NRG. And what that brought was honestly a pair of fresh eyes, to come in and ask, why or why not? And most importantly, though, it gave me a great sense of humility because I didn't know what I didn't know. So what you have to do is surround yourself by experts and practitioners in the field. And frankly, people who are smarter than you so that you can really lift up your organization. And so I think, what I bring to the table is strategy and operations. And as a trained corporate M&A lawyer, change management and operational strengths as this moment in time, in this transformation where we're shifting a ship in a new direction. And so I see my role as really setting a foundation to pass the baton to the next leader of the organization.
Well, I hope that's not too soon. I mean,
I just started. I got a lot of work to do, John.
Yeah. My experience is somewhat similar to yours. When I came to NJPAC 10 years ago, I had never worked in nonprofit. And I had worked with some and for some, but it was a sea change for me. It was a 180 for me to come into this universe, and taking the things that I had learned, some of which were useful and some of which it made absolutely no sense, and understanding the difference between the two.
Absolutely.
I'm learning every day. I continue to learn every day, right? So I'm sure you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's what makes it exciting.
Yeah. And taking an organization as substantial and long-lived and venerable as Dodge and making it nimble, that's a great opportunity, and it feels like that's what you're doing. But so tell me about the decision to transition Dodge into an actively anti-racist organization. And I know this work began when you were a board member, didn't start when you became the CEO, but was there a single moment or a series of moments that brought you and the board to the realization that you wanted to make a significant change in Dodge's mission?
So 2020, I think it was a catalyst for a lot of organizations, a lot of soul searching for a lot of people individually. But the pandemic and the calls for racial justice, George Floyd's murder, it was all of these confluence events, these crises. Honestly, it was a moment. It was a call, and I use that term a lot. There was a call that needed to be answered, and as you mentioned, Dodge set this course 5 years ago. We'd been working on centering our work on equity. We had a strategic plan with goals around equity, and we were on our way. We were well on our way. So when this moment happened, we were ready. And so these kind of confluence of crisis actually accelerated us to answer the call and put actions to words, to name race explicitly, and to commit to becoming an anti-racist organization, as challenging as that may be, but to put actions to words. And that's what we've been doing, particularly in the last 18 months with this work.
How do you define the term an anti-racist organization? It's something a lot of us are thinking about and working on, but I think there's not a clear definition. There's not a simple definition that folks have in their heads about what that means. Do you think the Dodge Foundation meets that definition now, or is the organization still in transition towards that goal?
So we have created and developed a program last year for 5 months, an anti-racism and anti-oppression learning to applied practice developed by Yancey Consulting. So our definitions and our language comes from that learning, as well as, of course, Ibram X. Kendi's book, How to Be an Anti-Racist. When we think about anti-racism, it's an anti-racist, and I have to read this because I can't have to get this right, supports anti-racist policy through their decisions or belief that racial groups are equal and do not need development. Anti-racist expressions also support policies that reduce racial inequity. And when we think about that at Dodge, it's inside out. It's changing systems, policies, and procedures from the inside out that promote equity and equality. Things as simple as, well, they're not simple, I should say, but examining and interrogating our internal benefits and policies and asking the questions of why are these structured this way? And really unpacking that and creating policies that are equitable. And so that's just one example. But then as we think about how we even approach our work, simplifying grant making processes, being clear about what we mean, and really practicing and leaning into this work. But it's inside and out. And I think this moment in time, this catalyst, was really a call for us to hold ourselves accountable to this work. We could not go out to the world and say, we expect you, grantees, community, to be equitable, to do X, Y, and Z if we weren't doing it ourselves. And so, John, to the hardest question you just asked there, are we there yet? Nope, no way. We are a work in progress. Like many organizations, we're still working at it. We are committed to becoming an anti-racist organization. So much around that is around internal culture building as well. And so we're still working at it. We're an organization in transformation, John. This is going to take some time. An important organization that's been around for almost 50 years. You can't change overnight. And we certainly can't change a system that's been in place for 400 years overnight. This is something that's going to take a while, generations.
Sure. So Dodge is, I think, next to the New Jersey State Council of the Arts, probably the major funder, nonprofit funder of the arts in New Jersey. I imagine, had dozens and dozens and have dozens and dozens and dozens of grantees, many of them grantees that you have worked with over decades. So as you transition as an organization and as a funder, what kinds of work, what kinds of organizations are you now funding or seeking to fund that you didn't engage with necessarily in the past?
So in June of this year, we really refined our focus of an equitable New Jersey to a just and equitable New Jersey. We're focusing our efforts on organizations that are addressing root causes and repair of structural racism and inequities in New Jersey. And we're prioritizing networks, movements, leaders, organizations that are closest to the harms, impacted by the harms, and have been excluded from investment and opportunity. And one of the things we're really focusing our time and energies on is connecting in new spaces and making Dodge, frankly, more accessible to organizations, groups that haven't had access to Dodge's resources and funding. We've issued a number of grants in the past year. We've made announcements about that around our Imagine a New Way grantees. These are organizations have been doing social justice work in New Jersey for quite some time. We're joining this movement. This is just an example of in the early stages of connecting in new spaces, again, focusing on policy and advocacy work on social justice, also co-funding with, for example, the Fund for New Jersey on redistricting and census work and collaborations. And I think you might get to this soon about some of the lessons learned from the pandemic, but these collaborations and co-funding across the state where we've realized that we're so much stronger when we work together.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, I certainly understand the nonprofit universe, certainly the nonprofit arts universe in New Jersey, a lot better now than I did 20 months ago. We have been obliged to collaborate and cooperate and learn about each other and our needs in ways we never did before. and we've learned the ways that we can be useful to each other, and we've learned how to be transparent with each other. There's much less siloing now than there ever was before. There's nothing good about a pandemic, but sometimes terrible events deliver opportunities, right? So talk for a minute about ways that you have been engaged with the nonprofit sector in Jersey besides funding. You've done education programs, you've done advisement programs, and I think that's been quite useful. Can you share about that?
So yeah, so we've had a robust technical assistance program, and I'm a firm believer of appreciative inquiry, and specifically in a transformation, and that is really looking at the best of what we bring over this 50-year history, and that's relationships and respect and connections and networking. And Dodge has provided curriculum to its grantees in these technical assistance programs. This last year, we offered through Yancey Consulting a virtual program. It's anti-racism, anti-oppression, learning to applied practice. Dodge board and staff participated. Almost 400 individuals representing almost 125 of Dodge grantees participated in this program. It was a spark. It's a starting of a conversation around anti-racism, anti-oppression, and over 5 months, it's a huge commitment. But I will say that, as we think about this work holistically, we are also re-examining, our own work around technical assistance and capacity building. There's many organizations that we support that provide this leadership development. There are capacity building service providers. But as we think about this work and connecting in new spaces, I think it's really important to acknowledge the self-determination of an organization and a community group to decide for themselves their capacity needs. So, one of the big shifts we made, many organization funders did this as a result of the pandemic, was shift their funding from project support to general operating support. And now the majority of our funding is general operating support. And again, it's just a reflection of, organizations needing to, again, have the self-determination, have the trust in them to do what they do, make the decisions on what they need. And so again, it's just really looking at how we're working. So it's, again, and I keep saying it's a transformation inside out.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting thing. You talk about general operating support. There are literally hundreds and hundreds of nonprofits in New Jersey, most of whom suffered severely during the pandemic. Their revenue streams dried up entirely. And you were one of the early, along with Prudential and the Grunin Foundation, early supporters of the Arts and Culture Recovery Fund. And that fund that's operated, I think, by the Princeton Area Community Foundation, has been granting out, hundreds of thousands of dollars over pandemic, millions of dollars, and most of it general operating, which is the money that small nonprofits need the most. That's been enormously helpful. Can you talk just a little bit about the Arts and Culture Recovery Fund and why you think it's important?
Well, first of all, we talked a little bit about some of these bright spots of the pandemic and folks coming together and really figuring out the best ways to really to meet the moment and provide for the needs in the state. And so this Arts and Culture Recovery Fund is a great example of funders coming together for this one specific need of an enduring and sustainable fund for arts in New Jersey. And, we know they have them in New York, in Philadelphia. So this is the first of its kind in New Jersey. And my former colleague, Sharnita Johnson, who's on the steering committee, is one of the architects of this fund. When she came to me early on, it was, honestly, such a great idea if we could get folks to come together. And one of the reasons why Dodge continues to fund this enduring fund is because it is supposed to be an enduring fund, but it also provides, some infrastructure that maybe, a funder may not have. There's potentialities for cash assistance for individual artists and entrepreneurs, artist entrepreneurs, where, the Arts and Culture Fund may be able to move more quickly than we could. So we're a strong supporter of the Arts and Culture Recovery Fund, and we're going to continue to support it. So it's a great bright spot that came out of the pandemic.
When we send our note out to the attendees this morning to thank them for joining us, we'll include a link so folks can learn more and maybe give, which would be a good thing to do, right? So in changing the nature of how Dodge operates internally and as a funder, I am sure that making a momentous change like that led to some pushback, right? So where did you experience resistance as you transformed, and how did you manage it?
Well, change is hard. And if it wasn't, people would be changing all the time. So I think, I think really where it was most challenging is really looking internally and really examining our own processes and the way we work. We can't, if we're going to lead by example in this space, tinker around the edges of equity. We have to lead by example. And so, but that's really hard. That's hard. There's lots of relationships built over time. I think, with change management, I think it's clear communication and being as transparent as possible, and meeting folks where they are. I mean, this work oftentimes over the last 5 years, it's almost 6 years now, was 2 steps forward, 1 step back, because this work of racial equity and justice and anti-racism is deeply personal to each and every one of us who approaches this work. And so how we show up in this work really matters. And we have to build up the fluency and the cultural competency, and we're never going to stop learning. And so creating something or picking a thing or doing one thing now, we have to think expansively. It's going to continue to change as we learn from this community, learn from our community about what is needed. We're going to have to innovate and be flexible and agile. And so when things get uncomfortable, we as humans, we tend to retreat to what we know, what is comfortable. And so what I'm trying so very hard to do is lead personally by example, but really make sure that we take this responsibility as a foundation, that we too are leading by example and sharing the story of this transformation, warts and all. It's not easy because we're one funder who's doing this. Now, there's other funders doing this as well, changing and transforming. We want others to join because together we're stronger. So we want to be very transparent about the discomfort in this work. That's the resistance, but that's human nature.
You talked about change management as you went through this process, and that's something that happens predictably in business, right? Maybe less so in nonprofit. So what is it that other organizations can learn? What are the lessons that you have learned that are transferable to others, whether in nonprofit or in business? So you have a lot of business operators listening in this morning.
Well, I would say first and foremost is we have to cut ourselves a little slack and be a little less judgmental of ourselves. This is hard work, right? And so approach this with a little self-compassion. We're going to make mistakes, and I think first and foremost we're going to make mistakes. I think being truthful and transparent in communications sharing what we know, when we know, and if we don't know something, share that as well, and give as much information as we can. The reality is the recipient of that information, it may not be what you want to hear. And so as the giver of the information, also being patient. Patient and being self-aware that, maybe the message isn't as clear as it could be, or perhaps we have to repeat the message. But I think, a lot of patience. Change takes time. We need to continue to be flexible and agile, to course correct. We're going to learn as we go. And at Dodge, in the last 18 months, putting action to words was really, really important, because, we've been at it for 5 years plus, and we answered the call, and that meant that we needed to start taking some risks and experimenting and trying new things, and having the courage to do what needed to be done to live up to these commitments. And that was hard, and that's hard. And so bringing everyone along together with that. I've had change management in corporate settings, now in a foundation setting, and I will say that it is never an easy task, for sure.
No.
There's no playbook, that's for sure.
Yeah, no, difficult conversations are the hardest and often the best at the end of the day, because those are the ones where real change eventually might occur, can occur, if we're persistent, right, in engaging. You're right. It's easy to turn away, right? It's easy to do the easy thing, and it sounds like you have put your face into the wind to the difficult conversations that needed to be had. So, talk for a minute about the kinds of work, the kinds of organizations that are now part of Dodge's universe that maybe weren't before you engaged in this work, and what type, and also what types of Dodge's traditional work did you step away from to any extent, and what parts of the work needed to be transformed or eliminated, given the new definitions that you've come to realize are the future of the organization?
So first and foremost, what we're funding, we continue to fund many of our grantees that have been in our portfolio for quite some time. But as we connect in new spaces, we have a grouping of grantees that we call Imagine a New Way grantees that have been doing this work for years and years and years, and that we're connecting with them anew. And they're doing social justice, advocacy, policy work, immigration justice, immigration rights, and really close to the work. I would also say that we have really been funding a lot of these collaborations and community response. So for 2 years in a row now, we have made significant off-cycle, above-budget grants to respond to what's happening in our community. Last fall, it was election integrity grants, news grants, those that are really honing in a multilingual notifications and access and information around voting. And this year, we recently announced $1 million in crisis response grants to the Community Foundation of South Jersey, Princeton Area Community Foundation, the Arts and Culture Recovery Fund. But as you know, I was very much involved with the New Jersey Pandemic Relief Fund last year, where we were introduced to so many new organizations in the state, but also as a foundation really started to dip our toes into immigration rights, cash assistance for undocumented families in New Jersey. As a result of that, we just funded kind of an offshoot of NJPRF, some Hurricane Ida response grants, a new fund at Community Foundation of New Jersey, and Afghan refugee resettlement in New Jersey. And one of the new grants we just made was the New Jersey Ida Just Recovery Fund, formed by a coalition of 8 frontline organizations focused on immigration and climate justice and decision making, which is really amazing, decision making by these organizations on where the funds would go. And so there's experimenting in new spaces. You asked me a lot of questions in that question, John. And so I wanted to really focus on what we are funding. And I also want to say that we're connecting in new spaces too, with emerging organizations, some smaller organizations that had never had the opportunity or access to Dodge funding. I guess I would also like to share that, as in our work, and what was very important to me, I guess, given my background in finance and being a corporate attorney and being on the board of Dodge, was how we bring all of our resources to bear to make the greatest impact. That's our time, our talent, and our treasure. And so when we think about our investments, we've made significant strides, particularly in the last 2 years on a number of items. I mean, over the last 5.5 years, our endowment has grown due to this, the prudent and, the prudent stewardship of our endowment and mission aligned stewardship, I would say, by our finance committee and our board. It's grown over $100 million. We've distributed over $90 million over the last 5.5 years. But what I would say, though, when we're talking about aligning our investments to our mission, over the last 2.5 years, we have instituted negative screens on fossil fuels. We've dramatically reduced to less than 1% fossil fuels. We have no investments in prisons, firearms, munitions. We have positive screens on women and Black and Brown and Asian and BIPOC owned and managed firms, investment firms. We've just launched a new program investment pilot from our corpus, $5 million for debt and equity investments in small businesses. We just made an announcement about that. And I would say, as we think about all of our resources to bear, approximately 11% of our endowment is focused on impact investment or strongly ESG focused. So we've made significant strides on really turning the ship on all of our impact areas, including the endowment, when we're talking about, really transforming our organization. So I wanted to just highlight that it's grant making, of course, but there's other ways that we're making impact as well, or that we're trying to make impact as well, John.
Great, thank you for that. That's a really great, informative answer. So appreciate that. We want to, in our last moments, ask the back office too, and Val Blau is back there with your colleague Janine Tierney, and we've got questions from our attendees. So Val, what have we got?
Great. So from an anonymous attendee, we have you seen meaningful change or innovation in the programs your grantees are doing so that they meet your new guidelines about equitability? In other words, has the shift you made as a funder caused organizations to also shift?
That's a great question, Val, an anonymous question person. So yeah, I think we've seen a lot of organizations really prioritize and take seriously what equity means for their organization. And so it's great to see that. But what I would say though too is, and a lot of organizations have heard us say this publicly and individually, we never want an organization to twist themselves into a pretzels to meet Dodge's funding guidelines, because so many organizations do amazing, wonderful work and really add so much value to the vibrancy of our state. They should continue to do their work. And if that means compromising their work to twist themselves into a pretzel for funding, is it really worth it? So we're really transparent about that. But yes, we've seen a lot of organizations do a lot of soul searching, particularly this last year with the anti-racism, anti-oppression, learning to applied practice program that we participated in as well. Thanks, Val.
Thank you. Next question is from Carla Panzita, and she asks, Tanuja, where did you start in terms of board engagement as you began the transformative process at Dodge?
Thanks for that question, Carla. So with board engagement, I guess in some respects, I was kind of lucky because I was a trustee of the Dodge Foundation. And I was very much involved with the strategic plan that took us in the direction of centering equity. The strategic plan was co-created by board and staff. And that was a 2018-2020 plan. So our board has been extremely engaged from the get-go in this work, and continues to be engaged in the learning of this work. You know, I guess one of the biggest lessons learned for me from becoming a trustee to now being a staff member is a real appreciation of, you know, what it means when you're living and breathing this work every day. In many respects, I'm a trustee on several not-for-profit boards, and I'm on a public company director. And it just was a reminder to me about, you know, the differences when you're a board member and a staff member. But we have lots of ways of engaging our board. One of the things we've done in the last 2 years is bringing guest speakers from some of our Imagine a New Way grantees, and really connecting our board and our staff. And by the way, all of our staff members come to board meetings in learning about the work that's happening in the field. Thanks, Carla.
Thank you. Barbara Kaufman asks, how does your commitment to being an anti-racist organization coincide with your previous commitment to climate change?
That's a great question, Barbara. They actually kind of coincide in many respects. Climate change and climate justice is a racial equity and racial justice issue. And so there's the many intersections to these issues that come together. It's a both and. We can be committed to both, and they are very much relate, if that makes sense. I hope I answered Barbara's question.
Great, thank you. Joanna Kenty asks, will Dodge be offering educational opportunities from Yancey again in the future? Will they be open to the public or just grantees?
It's a really great question. The Lisa Yancey Consulting Program was fantastic. Again, I would say even the Dodge board and staff participated. I would say not in the near term would we be offering, we're really not offering curriculum, at least not in the near term, as we're really thinking about capacity building in a different way. But I love this concept of opening up, you know, training and learning to the public and providing access that way. We haven't gone that far, but I actually really like that idea. The question is really, you know, what is Dodge's role? Should we be the one providing the teachings and the learnings and the curriculum, or should we kind of leverage some of the strengths within our state that also provide so much of these services as well? And those are the things we're exploring. But I really like that idea because the public should have access.
Great, thank you. Valerie Brett asks, she says, I am so impressed with what you are doing. Have you been able to work with board members or other important influencers that shudder at the term anti-racist? Were roadblocks put in the way, and how did you overcome them?
Oh, it's such a good question. You know, as I mentioned, this is hard work. And, oftentimes we would take these 2 steps forward on this journey and a step back. But one of the things that I have learned through all of this is there's no strategy in shame and blame. It's not a strategy. It's not a winning strategy. And my personal strategy, at least the way I like to approach this, is to meet people where they are, and to really approach this work and where folks are with some loving kindness. That's what I would want, some compassion, because this work is deeply personal. And as we do know that if we don't learn how to have courageous conversations and how to actually honestly to have these courageous conversations, people, myself included, we retreat into our corners and what's most comfortable. So that's one of my learnings through all of this, is to take a pause and really embrace the power in that pause, and to reflect and to and definitely not shame and blame folks. It's just, that's 3 steps backwards, and that's not what we want. We have a big work to advance forward. I hope that was helpful.
There, I was on mute. Thank you very, very much. I think everyone who is tuned in today learned a lot about what it means to aspire to be an anti-racist organization. I think you sort of made it clear to us that this is work that you don't finish this work. You don't sort of, go, well, we got this one. It is always evolving, and it is absolutely necessary that we stick with it, and that we do this work with whole hearts and total transparency. And you also said, I think, how hard it is to do this work, and not to be afraid of the difficulties involved in engaging in it. And so thank you, thank you for the work. Thank you for the inspiration. We're right with you. So however any of us can advance it. And this is work that certainly we're doing at the Art Center. And what I learn is that the more deeply we engage in it, the more holistic and collaborative and successful we are as an organization, right? And to your point, that radiates out. What happens within radiates out. So anyway, thanks for the modeling, thanks for the inspiration, and thanks for the work.
Thank you, John. Yeah. Thanks for the opportunity.
Okay, so in saying goodbye to you all, I want to put on my promoter hat and remind folks that this is coming up will be the final weekend of our TD James Moody Jazz Festival, and I invite you to come and join us on Friday. The Arturo O'Farrell Orchestra, Afro-Latin Jazz Orchestra, will be here, thanks to our friends at Rutgers Newark at the Institute of Jazz Studies, Wayne Winborn, thank you for that. On Saturday night, this coming Saturday night, the Newport Jazz Festival All-Stars. We have a special edition of the All-Stars that will celebrate the life of Newport founder George Wein, and Christian McBride, Randy Brecker, Anat Cohen, the great pianist Kenny Barron, and others will be part of that all-star group. And then on Sunday, arguably one of the finest jazz orchestras in the world will be at the Art Center, and that's the Maria Schneider Orchestra. So please come to one or all of those things. I thank everybody at home who joined in this morning. And usually at this point, I will tell you who's on tap for next month, but we're going to give you the month of December off. It's Kwanzaa, it's Hanukkah, it's Christmas, it's a very busy time of year. So we will rejoin you in the new year. And in the meantime, have a wonderful holiday season. We'll see you in 2022. Stay well, stay safe, and thank you so much for participating. And Tanuja, see you around. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.
Okay.